All right, and Dr. Neil, Dr. Shaw, he's a hospitalist. Go ahead.
Yep. Hospital medicine physician. I'm also a medical director at a hospital revenue analytics company. Work remotely for them. They're in Pennsylvania, and I'm enrolled in the Wharton Executive MBA program. And really, I'm here. I'm interested in the potential for medical devices to help have more connected relationships with patients. Lead to more meaningful engagement, and hopefully to find insights that can't be found kind of in the regular way of doing medical problem solving.
I'm David Finn. I'm a recovering healthcare CIO, and today I am the Executive Vice President at Synergistic, an Austin-based cybersecurity company. My IT background, I was one of the early CIOs who had biomedical engineering underneath them. So I understand the potential and power of these devices, but from a security perspective, I also understand the risks around those devices.
And my name is Carrie Rupp. I'm a venture capitalist. I have a fund here in Austin called True Wealth Ventures. We do seed stage investing, specifically in women-led companies, in healthcare and in consumer devices and things that improve the environment. And we mostly focus right now on what we call consumer health, meaning it's patient facing. It doesn't have to be patient paid, but we spend a lot of time also seeing clinical solutions, and probably will start investing in that space in our second fund. So bring both perspectives.
Chris, it's your turn.
First, let me give a shout out to Green Room and Dan. I'm a medical device engineer. It's an honor to be here. Thank you all for coming out tonight. My background, I'm a medical device engineer from Houston. Background, I usually work within quality management systems, ISO 1345, building medical device software. My background, education is electrical engineer, but I've done medical device software for the last 20 years, mainly on the physician programmer. I'm an engineer turned entrepreneurial.
You keep it, Chris. So we want to make this very interactive. I'm going to ask Chris a bunch of questions about his business. He can jump in, and then I'll sort of turn to you guys for your unique perspective. If the audience has a question, you can raise your hand as well. I don't want to wait until the end there as well. We have about 15 minutes left. So I guess the first thing, Chris, is why don't you tell us a little bit about your product? What is Galen Data?
Yeah, so Galen Data is a configurable, scalable, FDA-compliant software platform that makes it easy to connect medical devices to an FDA-compliant cloud. Most medical devices today aren't connected. That's changing. We're starting to see emerging market, and I was in the business of building these custom one-off solutions that can cost up to $500,000 to $1 million, 9 months to 12 months to build, and so we saw an opportunity to build it. Some companies came to us and couldn't afford that high price tag. So 3 years ago, we took 30, 40 years of medical device experience, and we've created a software platform that's configurable, and the whole idea is no custom software that throws you in that expensive FDA design loop to make it easy to connect medical devices to an FDA-compliant cloud, along with the staging platform for predictive analytics, being able to tell when that medical device will fail. We had failures in the field, and we wouldn't know about it sometimes for 3 or 4 months. And then a future integration for us is deep integration. Half our customers have already requested deep integration to electronic medical records.
So what is the market you're entering? What's the market you're tackling?
The overall connected healthcare market is $45 billion. There's a VC up here that would challenge me on that. But we feel that the direct addressable market is 2.3 just for connected medical device. That doesn't include the revenue streams for electronic medical records. And again, I want to give a shout out to Green Room. Green Room has been helping us informally, advising us on medical device connectivity for electronic health records, so we appreciate that. And then predictive analytics. There'll be a whole nother revenue stream there.
And what's your data strategy? And talk about it not only from what, you talked about analytics, Chris, but also some of the issues around interoperability and security. What are some of the concerns?
Yes, so I get that question a lot. There is risk in connecting medical devices to a cloud? Absolutely, there is risk. I was just talking to a parent with a child the other day that had diabetes, and they had monitored it, and the battery died in the device, and the parent never knew about it. And so, yes, there's risk in connectivity, but I think there's far greater risk in not having connectivity. We all live in a connected world now. We check our bank accounts. There is no equivalent of a check engine light on a medical device. Galen Data is going to facilitate that check engine light, be able to tell you when that battery is getting low, being able to tell you when that lead is going to break. And so, yes, we provide we're turnkey, so we provide all the cybersecurity from transit at rest, all the logons, PHI, HIPAA, that's all turnkey for us.
You also talked about the EHR potential as well with interoperability and smart fire and anything you want to address.
Right, so half the customers we have right now have already requested integration. So again, I go back to my opening statement. Most medical devices aren't connected to the internet. That's starting to change. Most medical devices, pacemakers, pulse generators, pain stimulators, they do not transmit their information directly into the HR. Do you think that's going to be true 5 years from now? Galen Data wants to be that conduit, wants to be that facilitator that takes that medical device, makes it easy, and then transmits that information to electronic medical records. It's not easier, it's non-trivial, but there's an interface out there called FHIR. Galen is architected to be to that electronic medical record standard, and we should have our first sandbox working in about 4 months.
And how are you growing your company, Chris?
One customer at a time. I'm a double E, and so I'm having to learn to do sales and marketing, but it's getting easier. Companies are starting to come to us. Our biggest problem is nobody knows about Galen Data. But again, there is an emerging market, so companies are starting to find us. And once they hear that value proposition of not having to spend $500,000 to $1 million, it makes sense. A simple analogy I like to make is that most of y'all probably use Salesforce.com. You don't go out, when you build a sales organization, you don't go out and build a sales tool from scratch. You go out and buy it, rent it, and lease it. Galen Data is no different. We are the Salesforce.com, but hyper-focused on the medical device industry.
Are you going after small companies, startups, or are you going after
So we're going after small, medium, and large companies. We have early-stage companies that need us the most. The barriers are smaller, but we also have a $1 billion contract signed that's using us, and there's another multi-billion-dollar contract that we're about to sign. So we go after the small, the medium, and the large.
And then lastly, before we sort of turn over to the panelists to get their perspective and give you a hard time, hopefully not too hard, some of the challenges that remain. You alluded to some of them, but any of the others that you want to comment on?
And that's a great question. So some of the challenges is my industry, the medical device industry, is extremely risk adverse. The company I work for, it's been in existence for 25 years. It's a neurostimulator. It still isn't connected. They see this great risk. The young companies expect to be connected. And so the barriers of entry are less for the neurostimulators we have. It's very novel technology. Some companies are based here in Houston, California, Austin. So it's the generation that's growing up today expects to be connected, so it's an easy sale. It's those legacy companies, but if they don't get connected, they won't be able to compete in a connected market in the future.
Perfect. Let's start with our doctors. Yes, I think they need a mic. There we go.
Thank you.
Jason, why don't you start?
Okay.
I guess the basic question, that's what we talked about this
Right.
before, is you're a doctor. What needs do you see for this, and how is this going to help you do your job better, and how is it going to help your patients live more healthy lives?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm probably working in your space every day for 20 years, so I have a really good feeling about what our problems are in relation to this idea. So how do you think that will be an advantage to the patient, and then how do you think it would be an advantage to the practicing clinician?
So let's take an example. So last time I was in Boston at a conference, we had a young company come up to us, and they're developing the next generation EpiPen. Mm-hmm. When you discharge an EpiPen, their technology is it's automatically going to send an alert to the parents. It's automatically going to send an alert to the pharmacy companies to resupply that EpiPen. But their big takeaway, and this is where the technology is going, is that child goes to McDonald's and forgets his EpiPen. He has a seizure. But he still has his phone. They never forget their phone. An alert goes out, being a beacon asking, is there anybody in the near community that has another EpiPen? If so, they can bring it and discharge it on that patient. This is where this technology is going. So we help the parent, we help the patient, and the technology, it's a connected world we're starting to go into.
So how does that work specifically for pacing devices, currently implanted devices that are already connected to the internet through a closed system, of course? How does your system deal with that?
So the key word you said is closed. So the Medtronics, the guidance, they can afford the 2 million, the 10 million on those closed systems. And there's no competitive advantage for them to play with the other companies, just like the original EHR systems. We do know that we have talked to at least one legacy company where they have a physician programmer that programs a pulse generator. We have a way passively to monitor the database. As the database changes, we can send that information. So from a regulatory pathway, their system doesn't change at all. So we basically add a parser, a monitoring program, non-intrusive, so they don't have to go back and hopefully resubmit to the FDA or get an additional clearance. It's just a monitoring, and it can send out the information that they're already storing to that database passively out to the cloud and then utilize all our program.
Do you see any opportunity for consumer devices?
Another great question. So the Fitbits of the world, it's a gray area. And so the Fitbits monitor your steps. But if you ever used a Fitbit, it might monitor, you walk the same path and it might do 500 steps that on Monday and then 700 steps on Tuesday. You wouldn't be able to use that Fitbit in a heart study, a treadmill test, because there's no objective evidence that it measures your steps accurately. It's a gray area, and so it's not just the device, it's how you use that information. If it's in wellness, we certainly could use it, and from a technology point of view, yes. But our real value play is when you cross that line, when you become that class 2 medical device, that's when everything changes.
What do you think?
I just want to clarify. It sounds like the clients are the device companies themselves.
Correct. What we call OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers.
Gotcha. So yeah, the idea that smaller companies that wouldn't have the ability to build these kind of platforms, with the assistance of your company would be able to.
Correct.
So hopefully could stimulate innovation and allow more of the smaller guys with interesting ideas to be able to find ways to.
So imagine that you get $3 million in funding, so your seed round. Should you spend $500,000 to $1 million on infrastructure, or would you rather take that $1 million and pour it right into your therapy, right into your device? So you could come to Galen, and for nickels on the dollar, we can provide a solution to you.
And are you finding that there are a lot of smaller companies where this is the piece that they're missing, and this it kind of allows them to move forward?
Yes. Yeah. It's back to connectivity. Most new designs are very innovative, and connectivity is in their roadmap. Absolutely.
All right. Dave, what do you think? What are you have some concerns from a security or interoperability perspective?
None at all. Absolutely. And first I need to try to understand a little better. Are you actually an aggregator of this data, or just a communication bus for other device makers?
So Galen is a SaaS platform, strictly a software platform. We don't get into the hardware. So the assumption we make, the hardware provides the connectivity either through cell, Wi-Fi, or Bluetooth. So an aggregator, yes and no, is that we are a pathway from a device into a data lake that we manage. So one of the examples I like to use is, imagine that you're releasing a new LVAD, a new heart pump, and you've made the decision to connect. We're not just looking at one piece of data from one device. We're looking at the entire population. And so we can do predictive analytics on all those devices as a large group, and then do analysis and determine if there's going to be a bearing failure in that heart pump.
So you're looking across the device, not necessarily a longitudinal study of a single patient.
Correct. We're looking at the entire, yeah, that's a great question. So not a single N. Think of us as a multiple. We provide connectivity to a device, and then we maintain that entire device population, data population.
A great need for this. I think this is one of the things we don't have as much visibility into the medical devices. So I would, of the 6,500 and some medical device manufacturers, you need all of them to get on board.
Thank you for saying that. We still have investment opportunities open.
And when you're connecting to an EMR, are you feeding that data directly to the EMR?
So I want to be clear about that, is that we are not connected yet.
Okay.
So Galen is architected to the FHIR standard, which is an industry interface that allows us in a standardized way to connect to a electronic medical record. It's non-trivial, they're siloed, but we've already had discussions with some of the major ones, and Green Room is going to help us when we're ready to pull that trigger and sandbox it. And more importantly, half the customers we have right now, and all new customers we're signing, that's in their product roadmap. They expect that to happen.
And that will still be device data rather than patient data.
So we are a conduit of data. The original equipment manufacturer has total and absolute control on the data they transmit.
Okay.
They could transmit a single RPM sensor data, or they can transmit as much PHI as they want. It's their decision. It's the equipment manufacturer's decision.
You're just the conduit. For
Right.
that.
And the keeper. And we provide all the controls and the tools to visualize that data.
So you are storing the data.
We are storing the data.
So then there's issues about the relationship with the device maker as well as the device maker's relationship with the covered entity.
Right. So our relationship starts and ends with the equipment manufacturer of that device.
You're smart.
Thank you.
I like this guy.
Yeah, make that someone else's problem and stay out of the data.
Yes, sir.
But if, I mean, clearly the visibility and the device issues. So that is the next thing. You're dependent on what the device maker gives you. Are they looking for guidance around what device level data they need to collect in order to do predictive analytics about mean time between failures and that kind of thing?
So we're in a position for our expertise to give them guidance if asked, but the decisions they make are their own. If they need help visualizing a particular piece of data or a group of data, we certainly have the expertise to help there.
Okay.
We can guide them, but ultimately it's their decision. We provide the tools. How you use the tools is totally up to the
I
manufacturer.
was also very glad to hear you mention ISO. I presume not only your software development follows ISO standards, but your manufacturing per se, since you don't do hardware.
So my experience is class 3, and that's the most stringent life-sustaining medical devices. This is a changing world, and so we're worried that the FDA might have a new interpretation, because you get various opinions
Daily sometimes.
And so we operate, not required, and we don't need clearance from the FDA because we're not in that category yet, but we operate as a class 3 medical device per design and operation. So we're currently ISO 1345. You guys aren't familiar with that. It's a quality management standard that any medical device will get certified to. And it's a global standard, and we have an international body that comes in and audits us and makes sure we're compliant. So, and I've been doing that for a long time, and so we just went through a surveillance on it, and we did pretty well.
Yeah, and the regs are going to become more stringent, not less. So.
Yeah, and so the burden of those changing regs is on Galen. If you go out and build your own custom one-off solution, you have to be compliant with those changes. We offset that, and essentially we have democratized the FDA compliant database by spreading that cost over tens, hundreds, or thousands of different companies.
Yeah, and the small device makers can't afford
Right.
it. Yep.
Carrie, what do you think?
Well, I have some questions about the business model. You clarified who the customer is, which is the medical device manufacturer. Are you service, or is it truly a product and there are certain features that are available to me as I'm designing my device and I have to figure out which data sets I want to upload and how I'm going to connect, et cetera? How much customization do you have to do for each customer, and how do you charge the client for that?
We are 100% a product. I've been in the service business, and it's hard to scale. We are 100% a product. We're a SaaS product, no different from Salesforce.com. Now, we're not Salesforce.com because we're hyper-focused on the medical device industry. So we feel that we can scale 10x, 100x without adding a phrase I like to use, belly buttons. And so it's very scalable. And the tools we're building out, no custom software, and the tools we're building out over time, and we have visualization capability right now. We have credential logins. We have portals, 3 portals conceptually for the physician, manufacturer, and the patient. That's all configurable. Essentially, you create a data model of the data you want to store in the cloud through our tools and configuration. We provide visualization, cybersecurity, access controls, predictive analytics. Now, we're young on that side, but that's a big growth area for us.
So I'm going to flip things on its head. You didn't want them to connect to anybody other than the device manufacturer, but I'm just going to look at what could be. So one of the challenges if you are the chief information officer of a hospital is that probably, half of this room is someone who has a specific device for a specific issue, whether it's heart or you're maybe doing brain or you're doing, asthma, et cetera. And now as a hospital, I have to think about, well, am I going to buy a different sensor and a different device for each one of these conditions and then figure out how to, integrate them all into my EMR and then figure out how I'm going to, do predictive analytics against the patient, not against the particular condition or the particular organ that's being measured. What thoughts have you had about having any sort of relationship where you can represent to a hospital or somebody like that, hey, I have 40 different devices in my software, in my system. You could integrate with me one time and get all 40 instead of having to go to 40 and buy them separately and integrate separately.
Another great question. We're a young company. We're hyper-focused on our...
Good answer for a VC, but what's the big picture vision?
So we're hyper-focused for the next
I
year
hear you.
on medical device connectivity outside the hospital. The sales cycle is very long in hospitals. You have a ton of tech. I mean, I'm sure there's people in this hospital. If you've ever tried to connect a device to your IT system, it's very, very hard. But with all that being said, and there are some aggregator companies that do that now, that they take different and they do dashboards. So we're hyper-focused on the device. It's a path of lower resistance, but we will be in hospitals 3 years from now. I can envision, 3 or 4 different companies coming in and having a single dashboard with all this device data.
Okay, and so I appreciate you saying you're hyper-focused. When we asked you who your market was, you said small, medium, and large companies. How many people are on your team?
7.
Okay. Do the needs of a small, new startup-y, device manufacturer who hasn't built anything yet and is actually incorporating you into their initial design specs look the same as a billion-dollar potential customer med device manufacturer who's already got teams of people doing that?
From a technical point of view, yes.
If you catch them at the right time in the design cycle.
So, very good. So let's talk about that. So you're an early stage medical device company. You're obviously starting off. We're a natural fit. You're a legacy, mature medical device company. We have to fit somewhere in your product cycle. Medical device design, when I was involved with it directly, is 2 years, and that could be a conservative. It's not 3 months, it's not 6 months. What we're seeing in our hypothesis, which proved to be true when we signed this company in October, and I did this when I worked for a neurostimulator company, is that you have an existing device that's cleared by the FDA, the therapy and the device. The company, big company, sees another indication with that currently cleared device. They go after a new indication for an existing manufactured medical device. That's the company we signed in October, where they redeployed a cleared medical device to a brand new therapy. That was our quickest sale, by the way. Within 4 weeks, we had them sign from first contact to close.
So here's a way to flip. When Dan asks you which markets are you in and going after small, medium, or large companies, you don't say all three because everyone's going to go, oh, you're trying to be everything to everyone. You shift it and you say, we're going after companies at the stage where they're doing a new device. So it's about you change the criteria around which you're focusing.
That's great advice.
Okay.
All right. Just a couple of minutes. Yeah, let's open up to the audience for a couple minutes. Anyone have a question for Chris? So this works.
It sounds a bit like Validate. I can never remember how to pronounce it. Is that that may be my lack of knowledge about what you do, but it sounds to me like Validate, which is a HIPAA-compliant cloud for connecting devices to healthcare systems or to EHRs.
So what Validic is what you mentioned. It's a great question, and we get this quite a bit. Validic is a data aggregator. They go into the hospitals. Their markets are hospitals. Imagine you have 6 bed-sized monitors doing all different things, different manufacturers. You want all that information on a single dashboard at a nurse's station. Validic will aggregate all that data into a single pipe and display it on a single dashboard at a nurse's station. That is not Galen. Galen is, you're the CEO of a heart pump company, and you want that heart pump connected with alerts, predictive analytics, connection to EHR, and without writing any custom software, and you want to do it in less than 2 weeks. That's Galen. Great question, though. Great question.
You're almost more like Red Hot Engine in terms of making that, just shortening the gap in terms of connectivity.
Absolutely. That's a great question. Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.
How do you get the data from the device? I mean, you're clearly not doing any custom software for the devices. how do you get the data out of the devices? I mean, exposing these things to the internet is terrifying to everybody. So how are you getting the data into your system? Because
Right.
it isn't, you're not good software for the devices.
Right. So we don't get in the hardware. We assume the hardware's there. Let me just give you an example. So one of our customers has a medical device that Bluetooths to a phone. The phone, through a web API, we provide a web API. That's cybersecurity. So we don't care if it's cell, Bluetooth. We don't get down into low-level communication protocols like I've done in the past. It's the manufacturer that decides what standards from a communication protocol that they want to comply with at the hardware level. Once that data that squirts out of that device, that's when we get involved. We provide software libraries, a web API that packages data, puts a cybersecurity wrapper around it, sends it to the Galen platform. Then we secure it again. When we store it at rest, we provide another layer of cybersecurity to it.
So between phone in your system and I'm displaying
Right.
PC and server in your system.
Right.
You got some conduits.
Correct.
Any? Go ahead.
I have, so Chris, obviously, it's great that your Galen Data can be a conduit and a facilitator for the visualization and
Analysis.
of data that's both from the human, the medical data, as well as from how the device is working. Have you had any interest in people wanting to see about the reimbursement of those devices being used, like where it's being used, how much, how it's being covered in different places?
Not until about 3 weeks ago, we had a company, and again, it's a single platform. We have a company we're working with now that has challenged us is that connectivity, predictive analytics, deep integration with HR, and can you help me with reimbursement? The answer is we'll figure it out. And and it's not a theoretical, it's a great question. It's not a theoretical question anymore. We have a customer that's asking us to do that. Can you help us with that? Sure. All right. I'll be calling you.
We're about time, maybe one more.
The hook to the device makers is utilization, because no one understands how their devices are being utilized. But I have to say one thing, because it's making me crazy. There is no such thing as HIPAA compliant cloud or HIPAA compliant anything. HIPAA defines ways you operate. It's how the hardware and software is configured to set up, and then the people and the processes. So if someone is trying to tell you they've got a HIPAA compliant, you can send them on their way.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, it's not any one solution. It's a lot of different things.
All right. Thank. Or,
Okay, yeah, let's take a short break. Grab a drink and a bite or bio break, and we'll be back in about 7 minutes. right, everybody, let's wander back to your seats. We're going to have a word from our sponsor, our first sponsor of the evening, and then we'll have our second panelist up. Yeah.
Robert said I was mean.
No, you were.
Okay. I was poking to take a hot seat.
Nice. I don't know, after watching Chris up here, I don't know.
It makes a little
I don't know
nervous.
if I want to be in
They're
this
not,
seat.
they're not going to peg you,
I was
too.
going to say.
All right.
Are you going to ask me questions? Or
No, you're just going to be, you've got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. That's tough for
So
me to
let's
do.
begin by recognize our first sponsor, which is Randy Stein. How do you pronounce it?
Steinley.
Steinley.
Yep.
He is with Cyber Trust Alliance, and I want to thank him for our sponsorship, one of our sponsorships tonight. Randy, tell us a little about what you do and why you got involved tonight.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Well, thank you to Green Room. Kristen and Bob and I have been friends for a few decades, I think. And I run Cyber Trust Alliance. We do compliance, security risk analysis, and consulting for healthcare. Specifically, we're focused on the small and mid-market. We are trying to make compliance achievable and affordable for the masses, where in many cases people put their head in the sand and think it's not something that they can achieve. So really trying to stay focused on that smaller space. I appreciate your comments, because I'm meeting with investors on Monday, so I'm trying to fine-tune my pitch. But we have a cloud platform that's called SIBA Risk Management, and that's covered entity and business associate risk management. So we're working with both doctors and practices as well as folks like yourselves to help them achieve compliance.
Terrific. Anything else you want to add before we start the next session?
I really appreciate the panelists. I mean, I think they've been fantastic, and I've learned a lot, so I hope you all are too, and appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Very much.
You bet.
All right, our next victim is Sean Bald.
Hairless. Bald.
Yes, with SemPulse. He is going to. He preferred not. He not use a microphone. So I'll actually give you one of these.
Okay.
So we'll see if that works.
All right. Why don't you give us a little background on what SemPulse does, Sean?
Okay, so first a little bit about me. I am not a hipster, but I'm drinking my second White Claw, so I'm well on my way. I'm also not a health tech expert. I've been at a handful of startups, a couple of exits, a couple of IPOs, and a corporate head of market intelligence for IBM, head of marketing for Reuters. So I've done startups, I've done small companies, I've done big companies. SemPulse is a medical device company that really came out of the hubris of entrepreneurs. So we're sitting down having a beer with a buddy of ours in the backyard after he's been deployed in Afghanistan for way too long, and letting him decompress, right? So we're just drinking, having it, relaxing. He gets hungry, he's like, "You're buying a beer, I'll buy a pizza."
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, so I'm still sort of at some product questions, like not fully understanding the use case. So how do I know if there is a trauma, and presumably there's blood and drama, et cetera, everywhere, that the data coming from device 2, which is stuck up against my ear, is, you know, the guy in the blue shirt?
Yeah. So the way this is done for that particular use case is these come sealed in a condom wrapper that has a QR code as it gets placed.
And you don't think that got thrown in the air in the midst of all this chaos?
It's all right there together. It immediately recognizes the device. It has a GPS on it, so I know where that person is. I can locate them and triangulate.
I thought you took the GPS out.
So I can still do, well, I can add the GPS. I've done half of the engineering for GPS before. SOCOM's had to put a hold on that. And the reason for that is I don't yet have FDA clearance, right? So I'm managing through my use cases. The nice thing about Special Operations Command is they have a full stop waiver from the FDA.
Right. Okay.
And the other thing is they consider 5,000 units a pilot.
So,
To my economics, which is your next question.
well, actually, no, I was going to ask about the other markets you could be in. Oh.
Sorry, Robert.
Okay. So obviously the military is a really great place to get a deal, but it takes a really, really long time to get a deal. And so a lot of times that can kill a startup. So what other use cases are you looking at? You threw in there like a football player at the University of Maryland, but I'm not sure I understand who the buyer is, what the benefit is, et cetera. So maybe 1 or 2 examples of other potential markets and why they're interested.
So we're already deployed in Afghanistan. We've won several $100,000 from the Air Force and the Army. So we continue to build traction through kind of our niche, very focused approach. We do have conversations going on with some bigger DoD partners like the Veterans Administration and the Border Patrol. So as long as you're not using this for a medical use case, right, it's not an FDA compliant device, right, or required device, right? So whether it's AR, VR training of pilots, you know, looking at their cognitive load, evaluating their performance, you know, whether it's, you know, a football team or airman training in Lackland Air Force Base. So right now we've had conversations with a handful of NCAA teams.
So these are more wellness applications. Is that the idea?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's a,
Okay, I'll pass it along for now.
talk forever. If you
Shaw.
So is the intention that it would be used for medical purposes at some point as well, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I would love for this to become like as ubiquitous as a Band-Aid, right? And I think I can drive the economics to do that. Right now, this device goes for $500 because in their infinite wisdom, the military thinks anything below $500 is a disposable device. So that makes my life easy. It's under $500. The application itself is $100 per license, right, to consume the data. And then for the AI collaboration on research with our Military Research Command and others, right, that is an enterprise license arrangement around data rights.
And for medical purposes, is the idea that it'll just be used for kind of a point in time, like, you know, there's a disaster situation, or for like more longitudinal purposes of like
Definitely
monitoring,
longitudinal,
yeah.
So we're working on flexible hybrid materials to build this out with, right? So one of the use cases the Air Force has been talking with us about is monitoring pilots. They have something called UPEs, which is kind of scary to me, unexplained physiological episodes, basically a blackout. Like you have blackouts that you've been monitoring for years, yet you still have zero physiological monitoring of the pilot in the aircraft. You keep trying to monitor the aircraft platform and not the pilot.
Okay.
So, you know, we're working our way through those, trying to be smart about the rate and pace, the way we do this. I'm not a health tech expert. I look at this as largely a licensing arrangement, right? If I can grow faster and get to market faster with somebody smarter than me, I'm happy. I'm basically lazy.
So I think you mentioned AI and analytics. Would the vitals data, is that just going straight to the clients, or is there an analytics platform in between that's trying to have actionable information?
Yeah, so we push down some of the AI onto the device, right? And the device has tons of security and compliance protocols, right? There's all kinds of things embedded here, embedded in the app, and through the cloud infrastructure that we have to manage through for the military.
Jason, some thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's really fascinating. I'm sitting here thinking of multiple clinical applications that I could use that device in my practice. So how long? Yeah, really. So one of the most expensive diagnoses that we deal with is syncope or fainting, and one of the hardest things to diagnose. We use a lot of wearable technology trying to diagnose it, and they only give us one element of what you're talking about. So that's fascinating. How long can you envision someone would wear the device for?
So I think the battery life, single use, is 40 continuous hours. You can turn it off and on, right? So I can get a month's worth of life if I'm just checking it for an hour a day. It's got replaceable and rechargeable SKUs. I think the longest I've had, you can feel this, it's a little bit hard. It's not uncomfortable in any way.
Right.
Where are you
So-
wearing it? Like I heard you say you're sticking a finger in the ear, you're holding it to the earlobe. That sounds like about a 10-second endeavor, not a 40-hour endeavor.
Oh, to put it on, it takes 10 seconds and then it sticks.
And where is it sticking?
So I'll bring up my
in your
colleague.
earring, or-
So.
Oh, you look like the
Are very
CIA.
fashionable. gentlemen.
Okay.
So it has an LED light there that we can turn off and on. You can see how it's attached to him.
So you
Right.
can look super cool.
And then, it delivers his vitals. Right, so this is largely a triage solution. I can have a dashboard, so I can look at a bunch of patients. I can organize it by red, yellow, green. I can organize it by whatever hierarchy. We've got a hierarchy that we've built, but it's customizable, right? So if I'm going out with a platoon, if I'm going out with a fire department, right, I know who fire departments want to measure, I thought they'd want to measure like victims. No, they want to measure the employees of the fire department so they don't get overstressed, right? So they know who their employees are, put this on them, right? I can go, here's his size, I can add weight, I can add other details into it that help improve or continue to inform the algorithm for your particular use case.
So it connects to like an iPhone or an iPad sort of.
Android and iOS.
Okay.
They have a tablet.
Yep.
Have you tested on any other body part besides the earlobe?
I've tested on a lot of body parts. That's how I ended up.
The G rated.
So, I'm not a doctor, right? But I brought in physiologists and all kinds of experts. Our patent actually includes this particular body location, right? The cavum concha, which just kind of is a magical place for the body. And we're able to use a variety of technologies. Again, not being doctors in some ways gave us an advantage. I should be careful saying that to this crowd probably, right? Because we came into it in an asymmetric way. We used accelerometers and other technologies in novel ways that people go, oh, that's kind of odd, but then they see the science behind it and they're like, oh yeah, that works, right? And then we give them our test.
Because it's not peripheral, right? As
Well, so that's a big part of it. There's some polysyllabic term for the peripheral motion error that you get.
Dave,
Okay.
you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll just add, I think the military use case, first responders going into disaster, this is kind of a no-brainer. We need to do this. As you start to look at those expanded use cases, I have some concerns, and I will defer to my physician friends here. But one of the things I used to struggle with in the hospital, particularly with medical devices, is physicians wanted all that data. And the use case I point to is we were hooking up anesthesia machines for anesthesiologists to look at the data. And we asked, what kind of frequency do you want? And they said they wanted the data every second. And I said, really? You're going to do a 2.5-hour surgery with a feed from the anesthesia machine every second? Well, we gave it to them. And they went, this is way too much. And this is what I think when we start to commercialize or consumerize some of these products, we're just going to, you guys are getting overwhelmed with calls and emails and stuff from patients. Anyhow, now they're going to want all this stuff in their chart. And to what point? So I think we need to really carefully understand why we're getting the data. Your first use case, absolutely no-brainer.
Absolutely, and the way we've approached this is, it's just data, right? So I have things like steps and a bunch of other junk, right, that I don't really care about for triage, right? But I can serve up the right, the UX UI to this is pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
So I can skin this in whatever way is the most appropriate way for that use case, And right now, since I'm basically not dealing with entrepreneurs who change their mind and run out of funding, I'm only dealing with people that have enough money. And I'm focused on this one problem, right? Eventually, I'm gonna have to deal with that problem. I think I have an approach to that problem, but it's not perfect. The bigger part of that solution, though, is can I partner with a Medtronic? Can I partner with somebody else that has a need to solve a particular part of that problem? Whether it's space travel or something else. I know, Jag, about space. You go solve that problem.
They have worse problems than the pilots do, the astronauts, actually. They do need to be constantly monitored. The only thing, and we're starting to see some of the flaws around AI in healthcare, and AI and machine learning are two wonderful things that no one has ever defined, which I find amusing. So AI, the key word in AI is artificial. So you can collect all kinds of data, but until a physician looks at it and says, this doesn't mean anything, or oh my God, I need you on the table in 3 minutes, it doesn't mean anything. So working through those use cases is going to be the key.
And it's got to help them with those decisions, right? The physician, right? The caregivers, the nurse, the whomever, they're the critical path in all of this. The AI can serve up some knowledge in an efficient way when done right, and it can be a cluster when done wrong.
And I don't think Sean needs this advice from this conversation, but I think other entrepreneurs don't see the timeline before that becomes actually useful. So we, for example, talked to a company that is in the heart space that was going to take a bra, and so women present differently for heart attack symptoms, and their heart attacks are different. And so the data that's been collected has always been on white males, basically. So this bra was going to take it in 3 different locations and be continuously worn, and it was going to get all this really great data about what's different about a woman. But that doesn't immediately lead to better care for women in healthcare. It's going to then take a bunch of studies, which it sounds like your platform's sort of poised to do, to then actually let doctors actually analyze, okay, now that I see what's different about a woman, how might I treat her differently? And if you're a startup who thinks that your value proposition is offering that, you actually aren't providing any real value until all of those studies happen and the doctors actually have a new standard of care and they know what to do with it. And so you got to figure out how to fund that gap between being novel and interesting as a new source of data and actually providing like clinical and or financial outcomes to anybody, and that's hard actually. So the tech may be novel and the implications may be great, and that time gap could be really long. So finding funders for that is hard. So the military is great for that because they've got lots of money.
We have time for 2 questions. Anyone in the audience want to jump in? Put the mic up to your mouth. Our next sponsor is James. What's your last name? James Hamilton. He is with Distill Health. James, you've got the floor for 2 minutes to talk about what you all do.
All right, sounds good. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us here. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. My name is James Hamilton. Myself and my partner, Jim and Nicholas, are the leaders of Distill Health. We are a brand strategy and communications boutique based right here in Austin and focused on the health tech industry. So my little black box warning, we're here hoping you'll pay us. So anyway, we started Distill Health about a year ago after working in agencies and healthcare marketing for a very, very long time, only to realize that healthcare branding and communications had shifted dramatically only in just the last few years. When we started with the simple idea that as products are becoming more complex, stakeholder relationships are becoming more layered, and the acquisition and purchasing cycles are becoming more demanding, as we've been talking about all night. The way in which brands need to communicate themselves, their functionality, and their value to the market has completely changed. And we started with the simple idea that simplicity is more important than ever to brands that have to sustain themselves and their communications to the market on the long arc, all the way from seed all the way to exit or the marketplace. And that's where we come in. So there are many agencies out there who have vast capabilities in what we think of as kind of conventionally launching products into the market and selling them to either wellness stakeholders or to patients or to providers. Our focus is far upstream from that, where a lot of the value is being created now in the earlier rounds, not between products in the market, but between products and the PE and VC spheres. We help you create the narrative that can get you to market, that can prepare you for market, and get you all the way there successfully through all of the hurdles that brands now have to get themselves through in order to get a healthcare technology successfully into the hands of those who need it. So we're looking forward, we're glad to be here and hoping to work with some of you soon. Have a great evening, all.
If you find the conversation tonight compelling, I do remind you of our hashtag, which is hashtag ATX Health Device Data. Please make a mention on either your Twitter or LinkedIn streams. And we've come to our third and final session of the evening. I'd like to bring up Steven Popovich, who is CEO of Clairvoyant Networks. Yeah, I think I got some comments saying we were having a hard time hearing us from the back. So you got to hold the microphone close to your mouth. I'll try this one.
Okay.
There you go.
How about this? Does this work? Ah, perfect. All right, super.
So, Stephen, you've seen the drill now twice, so let's just jump in.
Oh.
And tell us who you are, what you do, and why you're here tonight.
Okay. All right. So why I'm here tonight? I volunteered.
I asked you.
Yes, he asked me, and I thought it would be fun to do this. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. You know who I am. My wife thinks that's a sickness. I've been involved with selling. All my startups were sold to big publicly traded companies. My last company was sold to a company up in Minneapolis, Digi International, that's a leader in the IoT space. My last fun job there was VP of Global Healthcare, which I fell in love with about 15 years ago. We at the company pioneered a number of mission-critical enterprise connectivity solutions. So most of the hospitals in the U.S., for example, use our connectivity to their EHR systems from their medical devices, as well as most of the probably 9 of the top 10 medical device manufacturers put our technology into the products in the factories for clinical and machine data, doing all kinds of other cool things, leveraging AI, kind of the next generation of clinical healthcare. But one of the things that I found very elusive, because we had done a number of acquisitions that were really, really cool, especially for benefits in healthcare, was people would come to me and say, well, we want to know where that infusion pump is, and we have to be sure where it is. And so about 10 years ago, the RTLS, real-time location system market, kind of came up. Venture capital guys lost hundreds of millions of dollars because most of the companies didn't really deliver what they had promised, knowing where something was. So anyway, one of the companies I looked at acquiring got acquired by a software company back in the crash, and toward the end of the crash, and they ended up divesting themselves because they didn't understand what it was to do hardware products. And we picked up a number of their assets, and a technology was coming down the road that used to be the size of a pizza box until a few years ago, down to the size of the end of my thumb, called ultra wideband. How many people here have oh, we have one. I'm impressed. I'll have to talk later. Anyway, so ultra wideband is a technology, and it's just got actually implemented inside of the iPhone 11. It was very, as far as Apple's announcement, they were pretty quiet about it because they haven't got some of the apps working yet. But what it allows you to do is essentially develop platforms that know exactly where objects are, and you can do it four-dimensionally. What I mean by four-dimensionally as far as time stamping. So what we did, we started 3 years ago building a platform around this technology, and we just finished our critical patents on this. So the patents that we have are kind of the similar kind of patents you would find as a critical for autonomous vehicle operation, to keep cars from crashing into each other and going the right way. And so we can actually tunnel clinical data through this platform so that we perfectly timestamp where, for example, a patient's position would be, and for example, not just their location, but using other simple sensors, very inexpensive sensors on the market today, to understand if I'm raising my hand this high or just this high. So just within a few centimeters as far as accuracy. So what we use it for, and one of the comments earlier was kind of, in the healthcare market, there's lots of dead bodies. And so you want to pick your use cases very carefully. And with the technology we have, one of the challenges that I had early days with our investors was understanding, kind of, what are you going to do with this, Steve? Kind of a thing. And what's your go-to-market strategy, channel, all those kinds of things. Who's the payer? Because in healthcare, the payer is really, really important. So we started with cognitive memory applications. So I kind of, somehow fell into, I have a number of neighbors that like to raise money for nonprofits, the Alzheimer's Association, Alzheimer's Texas here in town, for example, and a number of other associated things for folks that have cognitive memory issues. So our end users today are primarily people that have Alzheimer's, some other forms of dementia, Parkinson's, autistic children, autistic adults. And what we do is we do activity monitoring, everything from simple geofencing, for example, with cellular technology. So this is a partnership we have with AT&T Wireless and Qualcomm for a platform that's basically like a super Android on my wrist, with a bunch of other cool little pieces of software and application uses that make it uniquely valuable for a professional or a family caregiver. You look at market size, it always comes up as far as when you talk about a startup company. If we look at just the Alzheimer's market for North America, for example, the cost of Alzheimer's is overwhelming. According to the Alzheimer's National Association, it's about $170+ billion a year. And at first I thought, that number can't be right, but every problem in healthcare seems to be $1 billion+ problem, right? But it really is, when you start slicing and dicing the number, it's a credible number. It only comes out to about $41,000 per year per person that has Alzheimer's. I don't know how many people here have known somebody directly or with Alzheimer's. Yeah, unfortunately, it is on a huge growth. So for just that part of our addressable market, which is the near-term targets for us, it's on a tear. So people like the NIA, which is part of the NIH, National Institute of Health, they come out and visit us and say, Steve, if you look at some simple things about and not the clinical stuff we've been talking about a little earlier, but understanding, for example, how to prevent a fall or detect a fall, which, of course, big companies like Apple are trying to do with their iWatch product, or a urinary tract infection. So if you can conquer one of those things or make a dent on one of those things, you're a hero. So with our technology, because of the precision and accuracy of the data, the reliability of the data, we can do both those. Actually, the UTI scenario was actually just so easy. I thought, well, this can't be that easy. Now the fall thing, a little bit tougher because we have to go to the third, fourth dimension with our technology to be able to see, the resident or patient fall to the ground, for example. But we can tell they're still on the ground, and that's where the NIH and the NIA are really interested in this, because falls are such a high cost for geriatric care. And I don't know the exact number, but we're talking about tens of billions of dollars.
So, Stephen, tell me how the panelists can help you tonight. You've got experts here who are investors and are in security and technology, and you've got physicians. What kind of questions or challenges are you facing right now?
Well, it's really everything. So security is always paramount. For example, in healthcare, you talk about, for example, tomorrow I'm going to be at a major hospital tomorrow, and really the whole tomorrow's meeting is all around security. So in my my briefcase, I've got like 40, 50 pages of questionnaires to understand how our technology can meet their requirements. So go-to-market strategy is always a killer thing for for any kind of startup, especially in the healthcare market. You want to look at, well, who's going to pay for it? Those are kind of questions. So I'm always interested in I think that you can't have too many friends, and certainly, there's a lot of smart people out there.
Well, that's a great invitation for David to jump in. You have some thoughts?
Absolutely, and I think there is great need for this, and I would be less worried about the security behind the four walls of a memory care center or something like that, where it's being tracked locally, and you can reduce staff, you can reassign staff. It has great potential outside for people who are taking care of people in their own homes or have responsibility and that kind of thing. And because of what you're collecting, then I'm curious about the privacy, and frankly, I think privacy is actually going to drive security. Privacy is going to be the bigger issue in the near term with some of the state laws we're seeing. Yep. So how do you make sure that only the people who need that data are getting that data?
Well, I mean, data security is kind of the short answer, of course, but it doesn't really, what does that mean to you or anybody else here for that matter? But that's why, for example, we're spending so much energy on that up front, now that we have an early adopter hospital that wants to scale this not only through the patients, but also through the clinicians, all the clinicians, and even the guys that empty the trash can, because they want to understand the whole patient experience. And this is a rehab hospital, so the value proposition for a rehab hospital on understanding how a patient might be progressing, because they're typically there much longer than your average patient. You have a heart attack, for example, you're going to be in and out of the hospital faster than your head spins, because they only get paid for a certain number of days. And in a rehab thing, like a traumatic brain injury, with some of the people that we'll be talking about specifically tomorrow, it might be months of recovery, and some of that recovery, a lot of it still might be weeks in the hospital, but then you're talking about maybe several months or even a year at home. So we made our technology so it could be scaled even to grandma's house. So understanding, for example, if my mom in the future, she's 84, she lives in the mountains in California, with a dog and a cat, and understand, hey, is mom really doing okay? And you think about the value of that, and it's hard to quantify, but there's really high value. So that's why the people at at NIA and even some insurance companies that are looking at, or that are big in the Medicare supplemental type insurances, are even now reimbursing for some of the products that some of the end products that we're selling, for example, like this wearable device.
So is the device tied to a patient?
Yeah, the device is a wearable device for the resident or the patient. Yes.
And is it a commercial off-the-shelf operating system, or have you developed that as well?
As far as the infrastructure, one of the things that we did, that would spend a lot of energy on, is that our backgrounds are all enterprise networking people, and the IoT space. And security has become such a big issue. Is that for our ultra wideband stuff, we actually had to go back to the kind of the old school and not use like embedded Linux or some of these other things that are commonly used even in medical devices now, because we didn't want to we wanted to be able to kind of leapfrog the security issue, which is really painful. And I'm long term supporting that is much tougher. But once you do a security review, like we'll start tomorrow with this major hospital, I think that the biggest challenge is we have to educate them on what that really means, because a lot of people, if you did programming 20 years ago, you'd probably say, yeah, I know what that machine language stuff or assembly language stuff is, and whatnot. But the other reason why we did it was because it's a wearable device. Power usage is really key. So you want to be able to, and you never have too much battery life. So if it works for a week, and everybody's going to want 2 weeks. If it works for 2 weeks, you want 4 or whatever. So that also helps us, with being able to have control of our destiny on power management.
The other question I have, and healthcare is struggling with it right now, 71% of the medical devices deployed in the U.S., and that's roughly 8 million. 71% of them are running Windows 7 or other end-of-life products. Yeah. So when your OS needs to be patched or upgraded, can it be?
Yes, we actually, with this device is a cellular device, so we have over-the-air updates on the device too. But and again, the architecture is a lot different than a Windows 7 machine. But I think that it's certainly, if you want to compare it with Windows 7, it's probably more secure.
Almost anything.
Almost anything really is. Yeah, I'm thinking, what else would be lower than that? Anyway, but yes, those are. Again, we're enterprise guys, so all that kind of stuff is native to our, to our DNA.
Let's turn to our MDs. What do you think, guys?
Well, 2 questions. First is how does this technology connect with UTIs? And for falls, are you saying that this is fall detection, or is it prediction and prevention?
Well, it's really both as far as the fall side, prediction and detection. I mean, really the thing that, the FDA won't use that term, of course, fall prevention. But what we do is, because we have such reliable, because first of all, you have to start with data that you can believe is, 99.9% or whatever accurate, right? And with these other real-time location system scenarios is when you have people like in this room, filled up with this room, people are primarily water. And water doesn't do well with baseband radio technologies. And that's why, you might have to go from over there to get a great signal even on your cell phone, kind of a thing. Now with ultra wideband, we flood this room with very low power RF energy, and then we're taking data points from these things that they're called anchors, and you can think of them like your access points for Wi-Fi, but they're in the room, and in a hospital room, you're probably going to have 1 or 2. We can actually read through the walls, which sounds kind of scary, and that's where this technology was birthed, was actually from the Department of Defense and the spy guys, and that's why they had these big pizza box type things to be able to do surveillance on properties, even in reading data and information through other areas of a building. So anyway, so the challenge, of course, is the mathematics that we employ with this kind of a technology. I'm not a great math person. I didn't get straight A's in math, but the other guys that work with me did. So thank God. Anyway, but that makes it so that it's doable. Now going back to the UTI, it's actually even simpler, because with the radar we can see that you're on the ground based upon your position. So 1 minute I'm standing up, next minute I'm sitting down. Because the resolution is so high, think of it like, well, sometimes I describe it like TV. When I was a kid, a long time ago, we had a 12-inch black and white TV. I was like, we are blessed. We could watch, 3 or 4 channels in Los Angeles. We thought it was great. Anyway, but now you've got 8K television. We're kind of like that 8K, to comparison, because now that we have that reliable data, and all that rich color and everything, which is part of, I'm just kind of. As far as the way we can use that information, that data, is that we could also see things like, for example, somebody uses a restroom, and we know that they're in bed, for example. We know that they're tossing around in bed. We know that they've got up, for example, 5 times to use the restroom. We know that they were on the commode in the restroom because, again, the accuracy is, we could figure out they're in the shower or in the wash basin. That kind of, roughly about 10 centimeters, general case is, we can infer from that, because of pattern changes and because of, basic data analytics. I'm talking about simple things where after a few days of, let's say, somebody in assisted living, we can tell, what their pattern is. What's their, some people call it ADLs, in that kind of geriatric business. Well, what if you could automate the ADL, so the data is actually right. Because if you ask my mom, for example, who's 84, how was your day? She's in a good mood. So, that was a great day. What did you do today? I don't remember. How did you sleep last night? Not sure. Even if you ask me how my wife slept last night, I'm like, well, I think it was okay because she didn't wake me up 5 times or whatever. But how long was she in REM state and things of that nature. So with this kind of technology, we can do cool things like that. Thread it all together. It's not going to be overnight where all those things will happen, but that's what the runway is massive on this in lots of different cases. But where the money is short term, as far as acceptance, is going to be in those spaces, in the geriatrics and in the rehab, because rehab is so expensive.
Jason, what's your perspective on this?
I think that's really fascinating. So the device is measuring position. Can it measure acceleration and deceleration and?
Yeah, what we do is the base platform measures the position, 3-dimensionally, and then we have tunneling technology that we patented to be able to critical timestamp other sensor data. So like accelerometers, if you want to know if it was a hard fall or a soft fall, because like geriatrics, there's a lot of soft falls. You could characterize it with, these sensors now are less than $1, and when we built the architecture, we can drop them in to the, into like a stream. Just think of it like, streams of information, lots of little creeks that make up the bigger river and make up the big stream that goes down to the ocean. I mean, but we have perfect timing. And again, that's where the comparison is with, how do you make autonomous vehicles safe, as far as, being not crashing into each other.
So do you think this technology is mostly going to be totally in the outpatient setting, or is this going to be mostly in a hospital type setting?
Well, the people we're talking, we originally, started with the outpatient side because it was easier to get feedback and try different things, kind of help refine the solution. But our real target is the B2B market. So, hospitals, for example, rehab therapy, treatment centers, and then taking this eventually into the home. Again, so it kind of full circle. But once we get back to the home, there'll be some other clinical information. Or just movement information. If we're talking to companies that work in research for, they're like the gold standards for understanding human body motion. So when you we're working with about a dozen universities now. So UT here in town, for example, their neurology group, and I was on the phone with a bunch of guys from A&M. We do a lot of things at A&M. We actually have one project that's being paid for by the state of Texas because of the Alzheimer's thing is now. It's become such a burden on Medicaid, which is growing at a very fast rate. It's like half the Texas budget. Is that everyone was terrified about it. So we have the first non-clinical project that's been funded by the state. For dementia.
Carrie, what do you think?
Well, I guess for me, the fact that you're focusing on this ultra-wide radar type technology that a lot of people don't know about, it has lots and lots of applications beyond the one that you're addressing, that it feels to me like it should be a platform play with an open platform and an app store, and you should be, enabling other sort of front-end UI, application developers to actually leverage your team's expertise around, understanding how to use this technology, the algorithms, all that kind of stuff, and let them pick that, hey, this could be used in the inpatient in heart settings for XYZ. I don't have a good example, et cetera. But as an investor, I think that's one small use case. I mean, obviously a big market, and maybe it's the app that proves that there's an opportunity here, but I see a business that's the platform play where you guys are enabling lots of other motion and position related in time, applications in the healthcare space. So.
Yeah, no, that's, I thought about it long and hard, years ago about, which direction do we want to go. And, it is a platform as a service type play. So there's a hardware component which enables these completely new applications. And we're under non-disclosure with some of the biggest players in the software business for healthcare. And they're interested, in kind of doing it, but they want us to do the hard part. To be honest with you, it's like, you guys put the platform in, we'll build all the software, and we're going to charge it, arm and a leg for everything, kind of thing. And I'm not going to name any names, but I'm sure you can guess who they are. But I went back to my investor and said, look, we can go down a path like you're talking about and build a platform that's general purpose. We had the largest technology company, for example, in the construction business, come to us and say, look, here's our problem. Our problem is we need to know, there's 1,000 people on this campus environment. We want to know where they are and when they're there, and if they're even if they get too close to that window, for example, if that window hasn't been put in yet because of safety issues, because we have an insurance, policy where we can't do certain things, or we have to wear a safety harness, when we go over that space. So to give them reliable data about what's going on there, or on a highway job where they've got miles of asphalt they're laying, but they can't get too close to the they can't violate certain safety protocols and things like that. But I thought
Well, you could sell the pics, and they
so we're talking to them
and the
about selling a
jeans and-
license,
Okay.
so that's kind of, and my last company, when we were in the startup phase, we did a very similar play, so we didn't have to raise as much capital. So I'm thinking that could happen, but in the healthcare space, just like the guys we're talking to tomorrow, there's 20 software applications that they have on their short-term roadmap. And if I built those software applications and we did it as a platform as a service, man, the numbers are just so big that it's a snowball type thing.
Stephen, we have a couple, 2 minutes left. Let's get any questions from the audience here. There's some in the back. Shout out.
Maybe I wasn't listening carefully enough, but what's the value proposition to a hospital or a SNF or a rehab facility? What's the value proposition?
Well, generally the value proposition is knowing what's going on digitally. So understanding, for example, is the patient, for example, in the exercise room with a clinician. So the clinician being next to that patient in the exercise room is probably a billable event automatically. So they're going to have this kind of completely automated as one example. There's also other safety protocols. For example, you get to like a assisted living facility, it might just simply be a matter of when was the last time Steve's brief was changed, because he has an incontinence issue. And, how do I verify that? Now, right now, a lot of that stuff, if it's done, is by paper. But there's no kind of, there's not real information there. With what we're doing, I can tell, for example, that I was, this close to the patient, within a few centimeters of the patient. So there's a tremendous amount of value in all kinds of different use cases in that space. But I think the short term, it's going to be simple things like falls and being able to take a understanding of who needs more attention, in a geriatric space or a other space like in traumatic brain injury hospitals, things of that nature, where you have very high need type patient environments. Well, we just have an early adopter right now, so we don't have what I would call real data. But this particular major player also is a teaching hospital, so part of the deal with us is not only actually they're paying for the whole project for us, so it's a great revenue opportunity with great margin. But they're also committed to publishing research on it. So anyway. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You took something like a 200, 300 bed skilled nursing facility, something like that, where they've got no money at all.
Correct.
What's the sort of setup, upfront costs, and then the value prop's clear, but that's
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the setup cost as far as the infrastructure side goes is, it's a couple $100 per patient room. So it's very minimal. Especially you look at the other RTLS solutions that crashed and burned, because they were fundamentally just not accurate. They were about $1,500 a room, that kind of a price point, $2,000 in some cases. So because we can read through walls and we have this math, this cool math that allows us to, okay, we've got a wall there, so we have to modify, for example, our time of flight information, as far as pinpointing where the positioning is. We actually, the problem that we've created for ourselves is that, like, for example, the hospital we'll be at tomorrow, we did an RF site survey. We were reading through the metal and concrete floors. Yeah. So what we have to do is we have to adjust our algorithms, but the benefit of that is that we built our own antenna technology, which is, if you're in the RF business, it's a big deal. This is a really big deal because there's only a couple of antennas that are on the market for ultra wideband. They were actually really bad for monitoring human bodies, because the human body is primarily water. So we found a rocket scientist level guy, a PhD kind of guy, and we basically built our own antenna from the ground up.
Was that David Dixon?
No.
Let me guess. Are you using Decawave?
Decawave is one of our partners, yes.
So you're using Decawave chip to do everything that you're doing?
Not everything. I mean, there are some new players now in the ultra wideband. At CES a few weeks. I would characterize it as Decawave, but we're doing it completely different than the way Decawave teaches all their other customers.
So I just have three questions.
Mm-hmm.
So one, I think the deployment cost, I think as you alluded to, is pretty high. Second, battery life of, 2 weeks? So that means you have to have a full-time employee changing batteries every 2 weeks or supporting that. And third, compliance. Compliance is always the biggest issue with RTRS. So how do you address these three big problems? High deployment cost, compliance, and battery life?
Well, I mean, as far as our deployment costs at $200 a room, the hospital guys have been sensitized to a price point of about $1,500 a room. So believe me, they love the price. So that's not an issue. The operational costs, what we want to do with our business is again a platform as a service, and that includes the operational costs of it. As far as the battery question, yeah, that sucks. I mean, I hate where we are on the batteries, to be honest with you, but it's not bad where the rest of the market is. I just want to get better at it. So, we have a lot of bright guys that use analytical technology to literally change the software routines and figure out how much power it takes. I mean, it sounds like it is brain surgery, I guess, for a double E, but that's how serious we are about trying to maximize that.
Have you done a study to figure out how many FTEs you would need in a hospital that has 300 beds to replace the batteries on these things, and compliance, which is one of the biggest problems, because if you don't have compliance and people don't wear those tags, zero value.
Well, when you say changing batteries, the way we've designed our tags, we don't have changeable we don't have batteries that are removable. So they're inductive charge, kind of like what you have for a nice, smartphone. It's hermetically sealed, which is part of the issue you want to be very careful for. If you really want to have a long, prosperous life in healthcare, you just have to do those kinds of things. So, it's yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, power, for the body sensor is always that's one of the things I don't lose sleep about it, but it's we really want to figure out leaps going forward.
Well, Stephen, I want to thank you for your time, and I want to say we're coming to a close here, and thank you everyone for attending. I'd also like to thank our presenting companies and our panelists, Neil and Carrie, Jason and David, and Sean and Chris, as well as our sponsors, Cyber Trust Alliance and Distill Health. Please stay a little later for some to mingle and network, and stay tuned for news on our April event. We welcome your suggestions, but we have some ideas in mind. With that, I want to thank everyone again, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Your time. That was fun. Yeah, it's pretty quick, right?
I did a lot of stuff. I did a lot of cool stuff. It's really fantastic.